In North Africa, when France invaded Algeria in 1830, they expected submission. Instead, they met one of the longest resistance struggles in modern history. Emir Abdelkader united tribes, built a state, and fought the French with discipline, diplomacy, and strategy. France responded with mass killings, burned villages, and land sieges that displaced millions. Over 1 million Algerians died during colonial rule. Yet the finally came 132 years later. In southern Africa, land was life, and when the British tried to take it, the Zulu kingdom stood its ground. In 1879, at the Battle of Isandlwana, Zulu warriors defeated one of the world's most powerful armies. Europe was shocked. The myth of African weakness cracked, but victory came with a cost. The British returned with greater force, determined to crush what they could not control. In East Africa, resistance took spiritual and collective form. The Maji Maji Rebellion united dozens of ethnic groups against German colonial brutality. Fighters believed that their unity and their cause made them stronger than bullets. Germany answered with starvation warfare. Crops were destroyed, villages were burned, an estimated 300,000 Africans died. The land was silenced, but the spirit of resistance survived. In Central Africa, the conquerings, mutilations, and mass death. Millions perished. The world called it commerce. Africans lived it as terror. Yet, even there, resistance existed through escape, sabotage, refusal, and survival. In West Africa, Samori Toure built an empire to resist French expansion. For nearly 2 decades, he fought a modern European army using strategy, mobility, and intelligence. When weapons ran out, the French turned to betrayal, false treaties, and divide and rule tactics. Ruled as a sovereign and refused to bow to imperial power. Her resistance terrorized because it shattered their belief that domination was inevitable. As colonial rule tightened, resistance evolved. When guns were outmatched, ideas became weapons. Education became defiance. Writing became rebellion. Leaders like Kwame Nkrumah understood that independence without economic control was a trap. He warned Africa that political freedom without economic freedom was meaningless. His vision of Pan-African unity was removed. In Kenya, the Mau Mau uprising challenged British land theft. The response was brutal. Detention camps, torture, collective punishment. For decades, these crimes were hidden. Only recently did the truth emerge, proving once again that colonial violence was never accidental. It was policy. In Portuguese-controlled Africa, Mozambique, Angola, Guinea-Bissau, armed resistance dragged Portugal into long wars it could not afford or win. Leaders like Samora Mahu insisted that liberation must change people's lives, not just raise flags. Independent economic systems designed for extraction. It survived confusion, to forget, to disappear, to submit. Today, African resistance looks different. It lives in technology, in activism, in cultural pride, in economic awakening. But its roots are the same. A people forget their resistance, forget their power. And Africa's power has always been without a fight. It was overwhelmed, but never defeated. The truth is simple. They leave us unchanged. Africa with you.
This story is part of Koa Tales, where African myths, legends, and proverbs come to life through AI storytelling and visuals. Don't forget to share and subscribe for more African stories reimagined with AI.
For decades, Africa was told to survive quietly, not to question, not to challenge, not to disrupt, to export, not to transform, to extract, not to industrialize, to follow, never to lead. Generation after generation was taught that progress came from elsewhere, that solutions arrived from outside, that leadership wore foreign faces and spoke foreign languages. Africa was trained to wait, to depend, to accept, and for a long time, that silence worked. But something changed. Not overnight, not in one country, not with one revolution. It started quietly, in classrooms, in homes, online forums, dangerous questions. Why do systems staying exactly the same? Because once those questions were asked, there was no time. This generation didn't just investigate it, they followed the money. They followed the supply chains. They followed history. And what they found was not failure to consume Africa, not develop it. That realization changed everything. Young Africans started reclaiming what history tried to erase. They studied pre colonial empires, not as myths, but as systems. They studied indigenous governance, not as folklore, but as functioning institutions. They revisited African science, engineering, agriculture, and trade. They learned that they discovered that governance worked before interference, that economies functioned before disruption, that identity existed before erasure. And slowly, the truth emerged. The problem was never Africa to sell cheap and buy expensive. Once that design was understood, it could be challenged. And that's exactly what began to happen. From fintech hubs in Lagos redefining access to money, to manufacturing zones in Ethiopia adding value instead of exporting loss, to agricultural revolutions in Rwanda restoring food sovereignty, to trade agreements breaking colonial borders, Africa began rewriting its own script. Not perfectly, not easy. It was momentum. This awakening isn't loud everywhere. It doesn't always trend. It doesn't always make global headlines. It doesn't always receive applause, but it doesn't announce itself. It prepares, and it doesn't export much. A self-aware Africa is unpredictable, and unpredictable
Is part of Coa Tales.